Food for Thought on News Talk 760 WJR is presented by the Food Bank Council of Michigan, creating a food-secure state. Here's your host, Dr. Phil Knight.
George Washington Carver said, "No individual has any right to come into this world and go out of it without leaving behind him or her a distinct and legitimate reason for having passed through it." Each of us are given one handful of life, and the question begs to be asked and answered, will you spend your life or will you invest it? Will you invest it in something that is bigger than you are and lasts longer than you do? This one handful of life is made up of these moments that come to us, and hitchhiking alongside those moments are opportunities. And like time, they dissipate. Nothing moves faster than time except a lost opportunity. The great philosopher reminds us that life is like a vapor, a mist, and life doesn't last long, but your influence can. I remind you of the story of F. Scott Fitzgerald. We all know him as the great American author who wrote The Great Gatsby. But the truth is, his life was full of errors and rewrites. His grandmother was well off, but his father never experienced much success and lived off of his mother for most of his life. F. Scott attended Princeton, but dropped out and joined the military during World War I. He never left the States and was stationed in Alabama, where he met his wife, who, as it turned out, had severe emotional problems. They moved to Paris, where he wrote The Great Gatsby. But he could never recapture that level of success again. Plagued by alcoholism since college, he died in Hollywood working as a screenwriter at the age of 48. Just 48 years of life that was filled with errors, and yet his influence continues to this day. Here's a couple of F. Scott Fitzgerald quotes. He said, "I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you find you're not, I hope you have the strength to start all over again." When you look and examine that quote in the backdrop of his life, you come to the understanding that perhaps throughout his life, he was starting over many times. As I looked at this quote, I did a little research and I found that there's a preface to this quote that we've heard most of our lives, especially since middle school when we were, at that time, forced to read The Great Gatsby. He said, "I hope you live a life you're proud of, but if you find you're not, I hope you have the strength to start all over again." But just prior to that, he said these words, "For what it's worth, it's never too late to be whoever you want to be. I hope you live a life you're proud of, but if you find you're not, I hope you have the strength to start over." F. Scott Fitzgerald. I know all of us make mistakes, misjudgments, miscues, and just a lot of misses, to be frank. But there are some things in life we can't afford to miss. There are some opportunities in life that are just too precious to miss. There are some moments in life we can't afford to miss. We are approaching that kind of moment right now in the state of Michigan, and we can't miss it. An opportunity to collaborate in order to create a food-secure state. The moment has not passed, time has not slipped away, but the time is coming, and we must prepare for the chance of a lifetime, to leave a legacy of something bigger than we are and that lasts longer than we do. A time when hunger comes off the table for all of Michigan's citizens. This is Dr. Phil Knight. You're listening to Food for Thought. Come back and be with me in just a moment with Mr. Jim Robinson of Michigan Farm Bureau Insurance.
Welcome back to Food for Thought. Once again, here's your host, Dr. Phil Knight.
On the guest line with me here is Jim Robinson, who is the Executive Vice President for Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. And Jim is a great friend of mine. And Jim, welcome to Food for Thought, and thanks for being with us.
Well, Phil, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Jim, let's just dive right in, because you and I have had some, what I'd like to term heartfelt conversations over this issue of food insecurity that plagues our state. And you guys are obviously on the solution-oriented end of this problem with Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. So tell us a little bit about your role, and then we'll talk a little bit about our conversations about food insecurity and how we're partnering.
Well, our role is pretty simple. It ties right back to our mission statement, and that's protecting the people of Michigan from the risks of everyday life. And albeit, our focus is primarily on insurance, it wouldn't be important if we weren't able to support the people who created our organization, the farming community. And the farming community in particular are the people who provide food and fiber for everyone across this great state each and every day. So we have always had a passion for seeing that the people and the citizens of Michigan are taken care of. Yes. And that starts with a warm meal, hopefully on everybody's table each and every day. But we also understand that that is a challenge for many families across this great state. And any role that we can play to help support that, and particularly in our farming and agricultural communities, we'd like to be a part of that solution. And just to let you know that we were started nearly 68 years ago by farmers. And, so they have been first and foremost as we continue to grow our company and now serve all areas of the state of Michigan. And as a result of that growth, we've been able to see that there are a lot of people who are challenged in order to find food and security on a day-in, day-out basis. And so we want to be part of the solution to that challenge and problem. And our relationship with your organization and the food bank is important for us as we continue to expand our footprint in the state of Michigan.
He's Jim Robinson. He's the Executive Vice President for Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan, and he's my friend. And Jim, you and I have had some conversations over lunch, and I remember one of the first meetings we had, I brought some maps and some statistics to you, and I'm going to just share, if I can, with the folks who are listening on Food for Thought today, that you were visibly upset when I shared those stories and those statistics with you, particularly about children who are food insecure across our state, almost 22% of them. And I think I'm just going to say that you just showed me right there. Here is an executive leader in the corporate world that's leading a company that is a company with a conscience.
Well, when you shared those statistics with me, Phil, I was amazed. I was amazed. And the other thing that amazed me and that's the degree of children who don't have access to food on a day-by-day basis. Mm-hmm. And even with all the programs that we have in place or appear to have in place already, that the effort has to be ramped up. And I think the other part was it wasn't maybe in the areas of the state where you would normally think that may be a challenge. Right. That it's spread across the entire state of Michigan, and it reaches and touches all the communities across the state. And that also just set me back in terms of this is an issue that we have to get involved with and help solve. And what better way to do that and also involving the agricultural community across our state, because we have had a long-standing relationship, obviously, with them. So we're looking for solutions. We want to be part of the solution, particularly, as it continues to be a challenge across our state.
Right, exactly. Well, you are a part of the solution. It's in your heart. It's in your head. And our conversations and our partnership. I was able to attend the one of the conferences, and Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan presented us with a check at the Food Bank Council of Michigan to do that. So you're giving your time, and you're giving your treasure, and you're also giving your talent, because we both understand that solving hunger starts in the field, and that starts with our farmers. And you guys at Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan are helping to take the stress off of them so that they can do better for all of us.
Well, we really appreciate the small role that we play, and would like to continue to expand that role. And I know our agricultural community and the farmers across this great state are interested in that. And in so many ways do they get involved in their communities and share in their harvest and bountiful hard work that they do day in and day out, and they are such a hard-working but giving community across the state. And I know that they're all in terms of addressing the food shortage and challenges that we have in this state.
He's Jim Robinson. He's the Executive Vice President for Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. Jim, thanks for being with us on Food for Thought today. Great thoughts from you, and we appreciate all your work, and especially your partnership.
Well, thank you, Phil, and wish you all the best, and anything that we can continue to do to help support your cause and help particularly the children in this great state in terms of their access to food and security. We want to be a part of that.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for being with us. This is Dr. Phil Knight. You're listening to Food for Thought on WJR.
It's Food for Thought with Dr. Phil Knight on WJR. Get in touch with the Food Bank Council of Michigan. Visit fbcmich.org. Once again, here's Dr. Phil Knight.
I have Cindy Estrada with me, who is the Vice President with the United Auto Workers, UAW. Cindy, thanks for being on Food for Thought with us.
Thank you for having me.
You and I and our co-host and President and CEO of Gleaners Community Food Bank, Gerry Brisson, have had several conversations about this challenge that we have across our state in food insecurity. And someone might wonder why a vice president for UAW is so interested, and I would say passionate, because I know, Cindy, you have directed dollars from the corporate world, and also personally you've put your talent and your treasure and your time into this cause. And so just talk to us a little bit about it and introduce us to why this idea or challenge and problem of food insecurity means so much to you.
You know, I started out in the UAW as an organizer, so mainly the work that I did for many, many years was helping workers organize, to have a seat at the table. And one of the things that I saw over the years is how manufacturing wages had gone down. It's interesting. It also parallels how union density has gone down. But, I started noticing that workers were working full-time, yet were walking into a food stamp line. And it was very frustrating because I saw, corporations making a lot of money, yet workers were food insecure, working, 40 hours a week and oftentimes more. Right. And then the more I looked into that, it's trying to figure out, I know one way to solve that problem is for workers to have a union and collective bargaining, as they do in our big three plants. But in the part sector, that's not the case. And most Americans believe manufacturing is going to rebuild the middle class. And I really wanted to expose that we're only going to do that if people can work a full day's work and then not have to walk into a food stamp line. So right. We did see that what's happened since 2000, over the years, I think the average manufacturing industry wage in 2013 was $15.66, or that was in 2013. Mm-hmm. But right now, 25% of workers are earning less than $11.91 an hour, which means they're working and collecting some type of subsidy. And that was from the National Employment Law Center. And then the University of California, Berkeley just recently did a study that showed that a large percentage of workers are collecting some type of subsidy after working a full-time job.
Wow. I know you and I have shared some of that data together, and Gerry Brisson has made the comment on this show, Food for Thought, that historically there was a very strong link between full-time employment and food security. If you had a job, you were able to eat, you were able to feed your family. But that over the years, as what I'm hearing from you, has that point of connection has lessened, if not completely gone. In other words, if you have a job right now, you may or may not be food secure.
Yeah, and in the study at the University of California, Berkeley, they showed that 34% of families on frontline manufacturing production are enrolled in one or more public safety net programs. And that a lot of people think that that's because they're not working enough hours, but it's actually a result of low wages, not hours.
Right.
And also, if they work for a staffing agency, that's 50% are enrolled in some type of program. So, and the total they're showing in that study is that a lot of people think it's just fast food workers who have this food insecurity program, but in manufacturing, it's $10.5 billion a year is used for these safety net programs for manufacturing workers. So and I don't think anyone, including corporations, want to see workers as food insecure, but we have to expose this so that we can come together and figure out how we solve it.
Exactly. It's not just about defining reality, the first responsibility of leadership. It's also about being solution-oriented, which is exactly why we started this show on WJR, Food for Thought. Because we want to come together and have the conversation and not just come with ideology or supposed bias. We want to come and we don't want to defend what doesn't work, and we want to find creative, innovative solutions to help people become food secure and have hunger finally come off the table across our state.
You know, one area that I think we need to look at, I know there's been a lot of debate in this country on healthcare, but I'll tell you what, when I go out and bargain contracts, one of the difficulties is the healthcare system, right? So much of that hourly rate is healthcare. And
Right.
If we did have a national healthcare, I mean, how much more could employers pay and still be competitive if they didn't have to deal with that piece of healthcare?
Right.
And that's their struggle, right? They're trying to figure out, how do I provide healthcare and still pay a living wage, right, and keep people off the food stamp line. And so I think one of our solutions has to be around that because our healthcare cost is just going to go up, especially as people are food insecure. Mm-hmm. It's all connected, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a larger discussion that I think I'm getting excited because I think you're starting to hear more and more about the connection to healthcare cost and health.
Yes. So, you know, you said a figure a minute ago about $11.91 per hour. Could you unpack that for us just a little bit? Because I know and you know that that's just slightly above the financial cliff. In fact, they're over the cliff at $11.91. Yeah.
So that's 25% of workers in manufacturing, and that in an hour. I mean, that's the take home what they're actually, getting per hour. And now there is a union difference when there is a contract. Of course, there's a higher rate, but I really believe that rate is so low, and for me, unpacking it is exposing it because same study shows that 9 out of 10 Americans believe manufacturing is going to rebuild the middle class.
Right.
And they're just assuming that that's a high-paying job. And this is just not the fact anymore.
It is.
So I would...
Go ahead, please.
Now, in our union shops, like the big three, GM, Ford, or Chrysler, of course, that's not the case in manufacturing. This is coming more out of, part sector and those kinds of places.
Right, exactly.
But I bet, if employers were freed up on the healthcare piece, I think it would be easier, right?
Right.
With this discussion for that rate to go up.
Yeah, I think that's definitely has to be part of the conversation that we want to have because we know in this state that $11.50 an hour, people fall off the financial cliff, and that is they're not eligible for any benefit. But $11.50 an hour, within the context of the minimum wage discussion and the livable wage discussion, those two terms begin to be used synonymously. And
right.
at $11.50 or $11.91, you end up with more month than you have money in most family situations, particularly young families starting out.
Right, and most families, and then you look at the cost of child care, and I know many families making this type of wage, $11, $12 an hour, and they will never get out of the hole that they're in.
Right.
And they're hard workers. And the other myth is that a lot of these workers are just younger people, because we would think that kind of wage is something, a high schooler getting out of high school. But the fact is, these are families, like you said. These
Right.
are men and women, oftentimes single mothers, and it's tragic. It doesn't for having the wealthiest country and for having the highest. We have high production. I mean, we're a very productive workforce. There's got to be a way to find a solution to this.
It is. It does. We've got Cindy Estrada with us, and she is Vice President with United Auto Workers. Cindy, I want you to stay with us, and we're going to take a quick break here, but we're going to come back on Food for Thought with Cindy Estrada. I'm Dr. Phil Knight, and this is Food for Thought.
You're listening to Food for Thought with Dr. Phil Knight.
I have Cindy Estrada with me. She is the Vice President with United Auto Workers, and she is Cindy, I'm just going to say you're a champion. You're a champion for all the people within the United Auto Worker world, but you're also a champion for families and for people who are facing difficult choices every month. Some of those choices between utilities or rent or medicine or food. And as you said in the last segment, we're certainly a very blessed country, and there's no reason that our people should have to live and make those kinds of choices.
Exactly, and I've been really excited about the work, just meeting with you and how your whole team is really trying to figure this out and change that conversation to get to the solution piece. So you're a champion. Yeah.
Well, one of the conversations we had led to you were the catalyst for a new project that we've started, and that's a self-sufficiency study that will be created by a University of Michigan PhD graduate, Dr. Diana Pierce, who is at the University of Washington in Seattle, and she's done this study for 38 states across the union, but it's never been done for Michigan. And this is a self-sufficiency study that looks at 719 different family types and really determines what that wage adequacy would be for that family where they're living. So
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. But I need to give credit where credit is due. The great leaders, take way more share of their blame than when it's appropriate. But they need to make sure and give the credit where the credit is due. And this study is a result of a conversation that we had with you in your office sometime last year, and it's going to help us understand. So if you're there's a single mom with 3 kids in Wayne County, what's that self-sufficiency standard? Versus if you're a single mom with 3 kids in Newaygo County, what's that self-sufficiency standard? And it's
I love that.
First time that this study has been done across, and we want to use it at the Food Bank Council to inform policy and help. We hope that we can come to a place where we can get so creative with our solutions that the financial cliff goes away, and there might be a slope, there might be a valley, but it could be a valley that is a lot more gentle than dropping someone off of the cliff.
No, I love that, and I think it starts a whole new conversation. I could just picture a day when we can get a number of people in the room and start to figure out how we get there, and I know we can get there because I've talked to enough people, whether it's somebody who is my neighbor down the street that is contributing to a food bank, or whether it's somebody who's getting from a food bank, or whether it's a CEO of a corporation, right?
Right.
In the end of the day, what we all have in common is we really don't want to go hungry, and we don't want to see other people go hungry. And so, I think if we could stay focused on that and really look at and make it real with real stories of what it's like for somebody, because, sometimes we forget that if we're not living that life. So I am excited about that, and I look forward to reading it and working on it.
Yeah, we're going to do this together. And, I think what you just said there is great. In the previous segment, we just had Jim Robinson, who's the Executive Vice President for Farm Bureau Insurance Company of Michigan. And I had lunch with Jim last year and shared with him some stories and statistics about child hunger in Michigan, and it visibly upset him. And to find corporate leadership that has that kind of conscience and is willing to give of their time, their talent, and their treasure to help solve this problem, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take the entire community to come together, from those who are hungry all the way to those who have more than they actually need, to come together to solve this. And I think that conversation is happening, and I think that momentum is building.
I'm excited. What are the next steps? And we're all in.
Thank you, Cindy. She's Cindy Estrada, the Vice President for UAW. And Cindy, you're a champion for food security and for people all across our state. And we appreciate you, we admire you, and we thank you for your passionate leadership, standing in the gap and helping people to achieve all that they can across our state.
Thank you, and thank you for continuing to challenge me to do more. So I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Phil Knight. You're listening to WJR, and this is Food for Thought.
It's Food for Thought with Dr. Phil Knight, presented by the Food Bank Council of Michigan. Once again, here's Dr. Phil Knight.
Gerry, great guest on the show today. Jim Robinson, Executive Vice President for Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan, who, as I said in his segment, was visibly upset as he discovered the stats and the stories about childhood hunger, but comes from a corporate setting. And then Cindy Estrada, the Vice President for United Auto Workers, who is dealing with this idea of, in the manufacturing sector of our work, that we're really manufacturing poverty when 25% of the manufacturing workforce is only bringing home $11.91 an hour in a paycheck. That's not enough for an individual to live on, let alone support a family. But here are two unique influencers in our state from different perspectives wanting to come together to solve this problem.
And of course, our main reason for believing this can be solved is because people want to solve it. And all kinds of different folks for all kinds of different reasons, some just out of the goodness of their heart, which is awesome. But some because they know it makes business sense, some because they know the community they want to live in is a community where people have enough to eat, right? There's so many good reasons to solve this. And let's remember that solving hunger or feeding the hungry is the number one social priority of every major religion in the world. This is not an issue that is new to us in terms of knowing this has to be solved and people want to solve it. It's been around thousands of years. The very first social program ever written into law was written into Jewish law, which you can read about in the book of Leviticus, that talks about how the farmers leave their fields, some of their field unharvested, so the gleaners can come and get that field or harvest that field to feed the widows and orphans, right? It's thousands of years old. So when you start thinking about the will that it takes to solve difficult problems, and you realize the will that's already there to solve this problem, you have a core of opportunity that you align with innovation and the resources that are out there and the smart people that are our biggest resource, really, to bring solutions to this problem. And that's I think, why we're hopeful. Listening to Jim and Cindy and how personally meaningful it is to them to solve this problem reinforces this idea in a huge way.
Well, it is also inspiring when people of that caliber and who have that much credibility and influence, but are totally different perspectives from their everyday work lives, but are both touched by this idea of we have to solve food security. It's not right. It's not moral, and it would be immoral for us not to approach it as we are.
You know, I also relate this right to accountability. When I think about who we're accountable to at the Food Bank Council of Michigan, aside from, the food banks themselves, because, it's our trade association.
Right.
It's the people in the community like Jim and Cindy who are looking to us to have real solutions. They're not looking to us just to tell a story. They're saying to us, we will support you in answering this difficult problem. And that is a hugely important reason why we continue to innovate and to talk to each other about what is the blueprint to end hunger in Michigan.
So, Gerry, what would you say to someone who's been involved in this for a number of years? As you said, it's the first social program mandated into a society, into a culture with the Gleaners, and that's where Gleaners Community Food Bank's name comes from,
yep,
correct?
Absolutely right.
So what would you say to someone who's been involved in this, and maybe they've given of their time, they've given of their talent, but they've also given of their treasure, and they might have a little bit of fatigue in this? What would you say to them to inspire them to stay at it with us?
Yeah, so I would say this. When you think about how much of the problem has been solved in the last 30 or 40 years, so you've got millennia before that, where the problem was really left in the hands of the religious folk that wanted to deal with the problem or family members. That was as far as the solution stretched.
That was the entire safety net.
That's exactly right. And let's face it didn't work, and a lot of people fell through those cracks, right?
Right.
Then you look at government and how government has evolved to play a role. And I mean, just an example is the meals that kids get in schools. A hugely important innovation, right? That wasn't there in 1930.
Right.
But it's there now. So you start to bring more people to bear to solve the problem, and the problem is better solved. Well, we're continuing to move that forward. Our timeline moves forward. So now what are we doing? We're saying, let's take these things that we know have worked and say, we've solved about half the problem. So we're halfway there. That's great. And it took all that time to get here.
Right.
Well, we think we can shorten the timeline significantly by taking what we've learned. Or another way to say it is, the reason we can see so far is because we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
Right. And so standing on those shoulders, it's less of a distance to solve the second half in some ways than the first half. So what I would say is keep at it, because there are solutions. There are people that win besides the hungry folk who benefit when this problem is solved, and we're going to bring those people to bear now. And
Right.
that's going to help in a big, big way.
And that hasn't happened in the past. And one of the things I like to remind people of in regard to our work, food banking work, is that we're really, in many cases across the country, less than 40 years old. I know Gleaners turns 40 this year.
Yep.
And was the first food bank in Michigan.
We were, yep.
And so, that's about as old as the entire industry is.
And amazing how much has been done. Food banks across the country serve now every county in the United States with just about 3 billion pounds of food. 40 years ago, it was 0.
Yeah.
And so, there's progress to be made and smart people working on making progress. And your leadership, Phil, has meant a huge deal to this state and to the Food Bank Council of Michigan, and just really love what you're doing to help conduct this orchestra of people who are trying to make a difference.
Well, I appreciate that. We're challenged, but we're encouraged at the same time. And again, when champions walk into your life, champions in their own world who say, I want to play in your world, and I want to make a difference there with you. It just is truly inspiring and encouraging with folks like Jim and Cindy.
Before we end this today, I want to talk a little bit about the blueprint to end hunger in Michigan, because that's fundamentally what we're being held accountable to by these champions that are supporting us.
Right. So, yeah, the blueprint to solve hunger across Michigan is really the 7 food banks coming together to say, what can we do collectively? And those 7 food banks are, of course, Gleaners Community Food Bank here in Detroit, Forgotten Harvest that we've mentioned on the show prior to this, the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan that has been phenomenal in the midst of the Flint water crisis. And then there's Feeding America West Michigan, which we heard from Ken Estelle on a previous show, and they're covering 40 out of the 83 counties across the state. There's the Food Bank of South Central Michigan, which is located in Battle Creek. Then there's the Greater Lansing Food Bank, that's obviously in Lansing and the state capital. And then there's Food Gatherers in Ann Arbor. And all of these are very unique, and they're all doing things a little bit differently, but they're all after the same thing, creating food security for every Michigander across the entire state, all 83 counties.
And doing a phenomenal job. Great people to work with, bringing even more champions to the table to help us get this solved.
So here, I think, Gerry, is some food for thought, if you will. You notice during this time of year and right after the election, celebrities often use their platforms to share their thoughts about their political preferences, personal philosophies, and in some cases, their favorite charities. Many will donate their time to film a commercial expounding the virtues of the nonprofit of their choice. And this is nice, but I'm convinced that the champions we need to create food security are listening to us on WJR. You may not pitch for the Tigers or suit up for the Red Wings or dribble for the Pistons or score for the Lions, but you can be a hunger champion, like some of our guests today. If you could invest some of your time, talent, and or treasure in this great mission and encourage others to join you in volunteering, I am certain we can go to the next level of food security in our state. Today, you heard from some of Michigan's top influencers who believe in this great mission of food security. Jim Robinson from Farm Bureau, Cindy Estrada from the UAW, and in the coming weeks, you'll hear from Attorney General Bill Schuette and Donna Murray Brown from the Michigan Nonprofit Association. Champions all in their respective fields, top performers and influencers who understand that hunger has to come off the table and be replaced by access to healthy, nutritious foods that people both want and need. Don't forget to find us on the web at wjr.com/food. And for Gerry Brisson and Phil Knight, thanks for listening.
Food for Thought has been presented by the Food Bank Council of Michigan, creating a food secure state.